say on Wednesday, I was on assignment for Politico to cover basically the day's events. It was pretty open-ended. So for me, that started on the ellipse when the president gave a speech. I think he was scheduled to speak around 11 a.m. I think he actually went on around 11:45. And it was, I mean, honestly, pretty low key. The crowd was really spread out. Back where I was, the audio of the speech wasn't great. So like I don't think people could hear that well. And, people were talking and milling about and stuff. Occasionally people would cheer. You could hear the crowds cheer closer to where the president was speaking. But it was, it was like kind of any political rally. There wasn't much to it. This woman, she was praying with her friends and this cutout of Donald Trump, which I just thought was amazing. I love how her hand wraps around the piece of him holding him in. So yeah, this is what it looked like. A lot of flags, a lot of American flags, the Don't Tread on Me, the Trump flags, Blue Lives Matter flags, a few Confederate flags here and there, but not that many. But then it came across this guy, which, he's wearing a noose, which is just, it's pretty compelling and pretty, it kind of stopped me in my tracks. He wouldn't give me his name or anything, and he just kind of looked at me when I talked to him. But it's one thing to make a sign. It's another thing to like get some rope and make a noose and bring it with you in your car to go to a rally. That whole process to me, I thought was really a little chilling. So they were listening to the speech. Some people started leaving before the speech was even over. Like it was just, people were not, I would not say super into it, at least where I was with the crowd. So when the speech ended around, I don't know, 1:30 or so, 1:45, people started walking down the mall towards the Capitol, and just thousands of people. I had found a seat on the side of the mall, and I was quickly filing because they had wanted some images from the first part. And I just saw all these people coming, and very much I thought they were going to gather on the steps of the Capitol. There was going to be some speeches, some flag waving, and that was going to be it. That was my sense of it. That was absolutely my sense of it at the time. So I finished filing, and I got up there, I guess around 2:45 or so, 2:30, somewhere around there. And immediately you could see that it was a very large crowd, and that the US Capitol Police, there was not a lot of them. They were not super well equipped. Very few of them had gas masks, and they were kind of getting overwhelmed. I mean, they would have this line of people, and the crowds would sort of like move around the lines of people. So then people would be getting behind them, and then they'd have to kind of fall back. And very quickly it went from like people yelling at each other to just like kind of chaos. So if you're not seeing what's happening in this photo, is on the far right is this rioter is spraying the police officers with pepper spray that he must have brought, and he's in the meantime getting a lot of other fellow rioters. A few police officers were hurt. They fell down, and they were sort of pulled back in the melee. And this is another example, someone who brought pepper spray and was spraying, and this is now like a mix of Metropolitan Police and US Capitol Police. And, like there's a lot of like, I don't know how close you guys cover this stuff, but there's like a Blue Lives Matter, which is like a pro-police group that's really like very much intermixed with the Trump folks. And you saw a lot of those Blue Lives Matter flag, like they have their own American flag for some reason. But at the same time, there was like suddenly this like real push against these police officers, this anger directed at them. I mean, these people had all gotten to the Capitol, and now like these people, I guess, were blocking their way. And it was just, it's like nothing I'd ever seen. I'd covered the Black Lives Matter protests extensively at the end of May and through June. And, all the violence there was for the most part instigated by the police, right? It was like police shows of force to move protesters. And here it was overwhelmingly these rioters who were pushing back the police, who were confronting the police. And this poor officer, for instance, like she had gotten pepper sprayed, she had gotten her mask ripped off, and she was like trying to hold the line. Like she was clearly like in pain. Like her face was just burning. Like when you get pepper spray on you, you know, your eyes burn, your throat burns, it feels hard to breathe. It's an overwhelming sense. And she was just standing there kind of like swaying, trying to hold her spot in the line. And it was just like, man, that look she had on her face, it would stick with me. I mean, she just looked like so like overwhelmed and scared and just like really trying to do her job and realizing kind of like the futility of it. And so this is what was happening. And like this is just kind of an example that I want to show is like this person in the gas mask on the floor is literally trying to pull a policeman into the crowd as they're getting pepper sprayed. I mean, and this is the sort of thing you saw, like this level of violence against security forces is, I've just never seen this before. I've covered protests and all sorts of things in DC for years, and never seen people do this to police officers. So I had the spot. This was like on the west lawn. It was a spot where I could sort of be close, but you know, hopefully not too close. But you know, it just turned into this like hand-to-hand combat, and there's sort of like pitched battles where like the rioters would storm the police officers. A whole bunch of them would get pepper sprayed. They would sort of fall back, and then you'd hear someone yell, "We need more people on the line." I mean, like they were using the language of war, right? And so another group would sort of like run at these police officers who were, you know, increasingly overwhelmed, and then would have to come off the line when they would get pepper sprayed and just, you know, couldn't handle it and were just totally overwhelmed by it. So this is a metropolitan, like a DC city police officer who had one of these pepper spray. It's almost like a water gun essentially. It has like pressurized air that shoots the pressure spray, and you can see he had some kind of wound on his cheek. So at that point, I got pepper sprayed pretty bad, and I had a gas mask on. It had gotten ripped off kind of in the melee, and so I'd gotten pepper sprayed. So I sort of fell back and went from the side, and then I started working my way around to the north entrance of the Capitol. And the north entrance is the way I go into the Capitol when I cover the Capitol. It's like the regular door, like you go through a little X-ray and then you get in. But that door, which is to the left here, was the scene of another part where people were trying to get in. And so at the point that I was here was when protesters on the west entrance were able to get through and got inside. So I was not there for that. There was a fairly short window of time when people actually got in, but you know, I guess over 100 people got in again, but I was not there for that, and I had moved around to this side. So this again, it was like there were two thick wooden doors with really reinforced glass, and you know, there was just this battle. And so at one point the protesters had used like a American flag to sort of lodge it in the door thing to try to keep it from opening. I'll go back to that. And so for, you know, I was there for about an hour, I guess, where they were just pushing to keep this door closed and going back and forth. And the scaffolding thing was crazy. I mean, you had this scaffolding set up for the presidential inauguration, and you know, people were just climbing it. I mean, this guy was like 30 feet above the air, just on the outside of the scaffolding, just climbing it. I mean, it's an absolute wonder that someone didn't fall and like really get hurt in this, because people were just climbing over it. And, you know, also that, you know, the number of people on it, it also like, I went up there for a while to take photos, and I just felt nervous about it. It wasn't shaking, but I was just, you know, I was worried about the steadiness of it. So at that point, it was getting a little later. I moved around to, I guess we're on the east side of the Capitol now. And this is where like the TV news, like CNN and ABC and NBC, do their stand-ups from, with the Capitol in the background. So they had all this equipment here, and they had just like, I had seen like an hour before, they had been filming stand-ups here with the cameras. And I guess they had left their gear here, and you know, the rioters seized on it, and they you know, they started destroying it. And I don't know if you guys know, these TV news cameras, they're like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they were just like lifting this stuff up and, you know, smashing it. And yeah, I was sort of convinced they were going to light it all on fire, but that never happened. But they just, you know, kind of kept at it. And then you would hear one say like, "Oh, I heard like CBS is filming over there. Let's go like get over there." And so this is when I put away my press pass, because I had been asked a few times like who I'm with and stuff, and I was just you know, it didn't feel like a good idea to advertise that I was press anymore. So this is back back on the West Lawn. I moved around again, and this is where we've seen that horrific video of those officers dragged out and beaten. You can see here someone is swinging a baseball bat, and no one else made it through this entrance. Like this is literally the entrance that Joe Biden will walk out on the 20th to take the oath of office. And this is what it looked like on Wednesday, and it's just staggering. So later in the day, eventually people were pushed away from the Capitol as reinforcements moved in, and they were sort of, finally they got pushed away, and then they got, this was, I don't know, 6:30 or 7 o'clock. They finally got, for the most part, pushed out. I think the Capitol had been shown to be secure by then. But you just had kind of people milling about. It was a much smaller scene. There were still people. This was way past curfew, right? There was like a 6 p.m. curfew. So at some point, as the crowd thinned out, they did start arresting people just for violating curfew. But it wasn't tense. There wasn't as much like violence at the time. It was just, people were being surrounded and arrested and brought away. So this is where I ended, and so I had driven down and parked near GW, so I had kind of a long walk home. So I just walked home and saw this Trump supporter photographing the Christmas tree at the Canadian embassy, which I just thought was this weird, funny image. Yeah, and that pretty much ended my night. So yeah, it was I don't know. I the more we read about it, I feel like the more, as tragic as it was, it could have been a lot worse, is what it seems to be the case. And I think obviously there's like so much more story to come out about this, that we'll learn more about sort of the breakdown in chain of command and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I've been in DC since 2005, and there's never been anything like this before. So I will leave it at that.
Stephen, you look like you're quite close in there. Were you frightened, or was it just the adrenaline? You're in shock and you just keep shooting, or you look like you're really in the thick of it?
Yeah, I was okay. I was trying to be really careful. I didn't spend too much time in any one place. I was always looking around. There was a lot of my colleagues were around, and I would see someone, we would sort of check in with each other. I never felt in danger. I definitely got into some spots that were not great. Like the crowds, as I was passing through the crowd, sometimes like people would get pushed back and you just kind of get crushed first, like really like pushed together for a second, which is, doesn't feel great. But again, I mean, I have to say, like, looking back, I feel like it could have been a lot worse. Like I really, that's sort of my takeaway with it, is that, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I said, I've covered things like this before. I have some sense of how to do it, but this really was unprecedented. I think we're going to look back on that day for like a really long time, trying to interpret what it all really meant.
So one of the things I've noticed—
very strong. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
One of the things that really struck me is it wasn't this image. It was, I think, the one perhaps before, where the police are literally wearing bike helmets. And looking at the crowd, in some cases they're better. This one, yes, where you've got someone in a gas mask, and in some cases it seemed the protesters were more heavily armored, at least, than the police. Did you ever find it difficult to sort of figure out who is next to you? I mean, I saw a lot of sort of tactical gear.
Right. Well, I mean, all the tactical gear was worn by the rioters. It was not worn by the police. The police were, as you can see, were wearing their police things, and were like woefully under equipped for this. I mean, really, like certainly there was not enough of them, but the fact that they didn't have, like,
They're wearing a bike helmet. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, right. And like, I have another picture that's a little bit wider, and there's 30 police officers, and like 3 of them have gas masks, and it's like, how did they get gas masks but no one else? Like the whole thing is so perplexing, and it just shows kind of the lack of imagination about what this could become, and how they were not ready in any way, and how you understand why people got overwhelmed, or the police officers got overwhelmed so quickly, because the sheer numbers of this and the violence of it.
Anybody have any other questions?
Stephen, can I ask a question? I mean, first of all, thanks for sharing. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes.
Thank you for, these are amazing shots. I was there, but I didn't get nearly as close as you got to these, to all three sides of this. When people ask you, who are you shooting for? Because they asked me a lot on that day. Of course, looking the way I do and sounding the way I do, I'm a little even more suspicious to them. What do you answer when they say, are you press or who are you shooting for?
Yeah, I mean, I said, like, I just said Politico and walked away. People don't know what Politico is. It was kind of like it was easy for me. Like, I'm like, to your point, like, I'm a white guy, which helped me in this case. You know, I'm absolutely aware that I had certain privileges and entitlement that some people covering this didn't. And I'm sure you've all read the horrific story with Aaron Schaff inside the Capitol, where it sounds like when the rioters saw that her badge said New York Times, that was sort of the instigation that caused them to like beat her up. So I was, you know, in many ways, I was not in the same level of risk as a lot of people covering this were.
Second question is, what do you think is going to look like this coming week, and then especially on the 20th, for all of us wanting to get out there again? How bad do you think they're going to come back and wreak more havoc?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say there is going to be an overwhelming show of force in DC. I think there's going to be checkpoints around the Capitol from what I'm reading. There's like 15,000 National Guard. Certainly what I'm reading about on Sunday, where they're planning to have armed protests at all 50 state capitals plus the US Capitol. You know, obviously guns are for the most part illegal in DC. You're not supposed to be guns here. So I don't know what it's all going to look like, but my hope is that the city is much better prepared this time around. But yeah, I'll be covering it. I still like, I think it's still like going to take shape. You know, we had like, they're talking in hindsight, you know, you see all this stuff online about how this was planned and stuff, but like, I don't know, like I think you can find crazy stuff online leading up to any of this stuff. So like, I'm a little bit skeptical that there was much to be made of that stuff. Like, but you know, people are certainly, you know, resigning and getting fired because they didn't prepare for it. But it's hard for me to see with all the noise online how you figure out what's real and what's not.
Thank you. This is amazing. I really appreciate it.
This has been so fun, guys. Thank you all for the really good questions, and thank you for making the time for this. I really do appreciate it.